Ancient sailors crossed vast oceans with no modern tools to guide them. This video will reveal how the world's oldest maps and the daring voyages of these mariners shaped everything we know about our planet. You will learn the hidden stories behind clay tablets and star charts that guided humanity's first great explorations. We will uncover how a civilization could navigate thousands of miles using only the waves and the wind, and why some of their most accurate maps remain a profound mystery. By the end, you will see the familiar lines of a map not as simple directions, but as a testament to incredible human courage. What part of the unknown still calls to you today, centuries before compasses or sextants? A Babylonian scribe pressed a stylus into wet clay, drawing the world as he knew it. This artifact, known today as the Babylonian world map, shows Earth as a flat disk floating in a bitter river with Babylon at its heart. It was not a guide for travel in the way we think of maps, but a document of cosmic order. For ancient civilizations like Mesopotamia and Egypt, mapping was an act of both power and belief. They charted the paths of gods through the stars and the boundaries of temple lands with equal care. These were not just pictures, they were tools for organizing society, for collecting taxes, for appeasing deities, and for understanding humanity's place in the universe. Their world was a blend of careful observation and deep mythology. A map might accurately depict the course of a river for irrigation, while also showing that river flowing from the realm of a water god. The materials they used tell their own story of technological limits and ingenuity. In Mesopotamia, maps were inscribed on durable clay tablets, baked hard in the sun. In Egypt, they were drawn on fragile papyrus scrolls, a precious and perishable medium. Historians point out that the circular shape of the Babylonian map was deeply symbolic, representing a unified, walled cosmos. It was a world view, not a world atlas. So how did these symbolic charts, so rooted in myth, inspire generations to sail beyond the known world? They provided the first crucial framework, a mental canvas onto which every new discovery, every returning sailor's tale could be painted. They were the starting line for a race into the unknown. Yet these symbolic worldviews did not stay confined to clay. A new kind of courage was brewing along the shorelines, where the sea was not a cosmic boundary but a highway. The Phoenicians, master traders of the ancient Mediterranean, built sleek galleys from mighty cedar wood, vessels capable of carrying goods and people from the Levant all the way to the tin-rich shores of Britain. Far to the east, the Minoans of Crete ruled the waves with their powerful fleet, their palaces filled with treasures from across the sea. But perhaps the most astounding voyages belonged to the early Polynesians. They did not sail in massive ships, but in elegant, twin-hulled canoes stabilized by outriggers, crafts perfectly designed to dance with the ocean swells. These cultures possessed a form of knowledge that was not written down but lived, passed from elder to apprentice through song and story. They read the ocean itself. A navigator would lie in the hull of his canoe, feeling the unique rhythm of waves reflected from an unseen island miles away. He knew the specific flight paths of birds at dusk, a sure sign that land was near. He memorized the star paths, the way certain constellations rose and set, creating a celestial compass across the vast, empty Pacific. This was a science of observation, refined over countless generations. Archaeologists tracing the expansion of the Lapita culture find their distinctive pottery scattered across islands from New Guinea to Samoa, a trail of breadcrumbs that marks one of humanity's greatest migrations. They settled thousands of islands, crossing distances so immense that the space between them was like sailing from London to New York. not once but repeatedly, with no guarantee of finding anything at all. To embark on such a journey required a profound trust in knowledge and a bravery we can scarcely comprehend. They set sail into the blue horizon, guided only by the wind, the waves, and the wisdom of their ancestors. So what were the actual tools that transformed this deep environmental knowledge into a repeatable system of navigation? A master navigator on the open Pacific would watch for the star known as Hokulea rising directly over his destination island. He did not need a single chart drawn on paper. The entire night sky was his map, a great dome of turning lights where every star was a familiar signpost. This was the essence of celestial navigation, a skill so refined it could guide a canoe across thousands of miles of empty ocean. The principle was elegant in its simplicity. As a sailor traveled north or south, the sky above him changed. Stars that once skimmed the horizon would climb higher, while others would disappear completely. In the northern hemisphere, the North Star, Polaris, became the most crucial fixed point. Its height above the horizon, measured roughly with a hand or a simple wooden device, directly indicated your latitude. The farther north you sailed, the higher Polaris appeared to climb, but the sky was a dynamic map. Ancient sailors had to know not just the stars, but their schedules. They memorized which constellations rose and set at specific times of the year, creating a mental calendar that told them when to depart on a voyage to catch favorable winds and currents. They tracked the sun's path, noting how it shifted north and south with the seasons, providing another set of directional cues. Historians point to incredible tools developed to codify this knowledge. The Greeks perfected the Astrolabe, a complex brass model of the universe that could predict celestial movements. Meanwhile, Polynesian navigators used a simpler, but no less effective, mental construct known as the star compass. It divided the horizon into 32 houses, each anchored by a specific star's rising and setting points. A navigator would sit in his canoe, visualizing this compass around him, and know his direction by which star house was dominant in the sky. Perhaps one of the most ingenious solutions to a navigator's problem came from the Vikings. How do you find your way when the sky is overcast and the sun is hidden? They are believed to have used a magical stone called a solarstein or sunstone. This was not a mythical object, but a crystal of Iceland spar, a mineral that polarizes light. By looking through the crystal and rotating it, a skilled user could locate the sun's position in the sky with surprising accuracy, even through thick cloud cover. Can you picture trying to cross an ocean using only what you see above you? Your entire journey would be a constant, silent conversation with the heavens. This deep celestial knowledge, accumulated over millennia, did not just allow for exploration. It built the foundational understanding that would one day be captured in metal and glass, leading to the next great leap in finding our way. A sailor on the Indian Ocean holds a small wooden rectangle up to his eye, its string taut against his nose. This is a camel, and he is measuring the height of the North Star above the horizon. By sliding the string along the board to match the star's position, he finds his latitude. It is a brilliantly simple tool, a piece of technology that turned the abstract patterns of the sky into a tangible, repeatable measurement. This was the next great leap, the move from pure environmental observation to the creation of physical instruments. While celestial knowledge provided the map, these new devices provided the ruler and the clock. The Chinese developed the south-pointing chariot, a complex gear-driven mechanism that used differential rotation to keep a pointer aimed south, no matter which way the cart turned. Though likely more ceremonial than practical for sea travel, it demonstrated a profound early understanding of mechanical navigation. The Greeks refined the dioptra, a precision sighting tool for measuring angles between stars or landmarks, a precursor to more advanced maritime instruments. The great geographer Ptolemy himself wrote that accurate geography depended on the precise determination of locations, a task impossible without the right instruments. So what were these crucial devices? The log line was a knotted rope tied to a floating piece of wood, thrown overboard to measure a ship's speed through the water. The cross staff allowed a navigator to measure the angle between the horizon and a star, giving a more precise latitude reading than the camel, and the sandglass, turning every half hour, provided the only reliable measure of time at sea, essential for estimating distance traveled. Arab and Persian traders mastered the use of the astrolabe at sea, a portable version of the complex Greek device that could solve problems of time and position based on the sun and stars. Can you appreciate the sheer ingenuity of creating a working compass from a magnetized needle floating in a bowl of water, or calculating your ship's position with a piece of wood and a string? These were not just tools, they were extensions of the navigator's mind, translating the whispers of the natural world into hard data. This data, collected on countless voyages, became the raw material for a revolution. It was the beginning of a new era, one where the world could finally be measured, charted, and truly known. A Genos sea captain in the late 13th century unrolls a vellum chart on a swaying deck. He is not looking at a symbolic disk of the world, but at a practical guide to the sea itself. This is a Portolan chart, and its detailed, crisscrossing lines are his highway from Italy to the markets of Alexandria. Unlike the earlier Babylonian map, this chart ignores the unknown interior of continents. It focuses entirely on the coastline, tracing every bay, headland, and river mouth with an accuracy that would astonish for centuries. The Mediterranean is rendered not as a vague shape, but as a recognizable, navigable space. The most striking feature is the web of lines radiating from central points, a network known as room lines or wind roses. Each line corresponds to a compass bearing, a constant direction a ship could hold to sail from one known port to another. A navigator would lay a ruler between 2 points, find the room line that matched its angle, and then simply follow that compass direction across the open water. Historians point out that these charts did not emerge from royal courts or scholarly institutions. They were born from the direct, collective experience of countless sailors. Each captain's log, each pilot's memory of a coastline, was slowly compiled and refined into a single, shared visual language. The oldest surviving example, the Carta Pisana from around the late 13th century, shows this incredible detail. It is a map drawn by sailors for sailors, its orientation often placed east at the top, reflecting the sacred direction of Jerusalem, but its scale and the precise placement of ports were purely practical. Every safe harbor is noted, every hidden shoal and dangerous rock is clearly marked with crosses or warnings. Can you grasp how this changed the very nature of a sea voyage? The chart did not just show you where you were, it showed you a clear, direct path to where you wanted to be. It transformed the Mediterranean from a vast, intimidating mystery into a series of connected, manageable journeys. The risk of vanishing into the blue was dramatically reduced because the chart gave a captain confidence. He was no longer solely dependent on the memory of one old sailor or the flight of a bird. He had a permanent record, a tool that could be studied before departure and consulted in a crisis. This new confidence, born from a piece of cured animal skin and a web of inked lines, would soon push ambitions far beyond the familiar shores of the Mediterranean. The Portolan chart offered a clear path from one known port to another, but what lay beyond the chart's edge was a space for the imagination. Greek poets told of Jason and the Argonauts, a crew of heroes sailing the ship Argo in search of a mythical golden fleece. Their voyage was plotted through very real and dangerous waters like the Bosporus, yet their destination was a land of legend. This blending of the tangible and the imagined was not a mistake on ancient maps, it was their purpose. Cartographers filled the blank spaces on their parchments with places like the warm, fertile Isles of the Blessed, or the mysterious northern island of Thule, said to lie at the very edge of the world. They drew roaring sea monsters in the ocean depths and warned of a terrifying waterfall at the world's edge where the sea poured into nothingness. Why would a mapmaker trying to represent the world include things that were not real? These elements served many roles. They were placeholders for the unknown, a way of saying, beyond here we have only stories. They were also expressions of cultural fears and philosophical ideals. Plato wrote of Atlantis, a powerful and sophisticated island kingdom that sank beneath the waves in a single day and night. This was not just a story, it was a moral lesson about the dangers of pride and the wrath of the gods. Medieval world maps, or Mappa Mundi, took this fusion even further. The Great Hereford Mappa Mundi, created around the year 1300, is a perfect example. It places Jerusalem at the center of a circular world, charting real cities and coastlines, but it also illustrates biblical events like the Garden of Eden and Noah's Ark right alongside these geographical features. For the person who viewed this map, the physical journey of a pilgrim was inseparable from their spiritual journey. The map was a single canvas showing both the lands of man and the works of God. What does this deep need to populate the unknown with monsters and paradise tell us about ourselves? It reveals a fundamental human curiosity, a drive to explain what we cannot see and to find meaning in the vast emptiness. These mythical maps, for all their inaccuracies, were a powerful engine for exploration. The dream of finding El Dorado's golden cities or the Fountain of Youth drove real ships with real crews into uncharted waters. The line between a navigator's chart and a storyteller's tale was often beautifully and purposefully blurred. The double-hulled canoe glides onto the black sand beach, its voyage of thousands of miles complete. The crew has not seen land for weeks, yet they have arrived precisely at their target, the Hawaiian Islands. This was the pinnacle of Polynesian exploration, a feat of navigation so advanced it seems almost supernatural to us today. Their system was a living science built entirely on observation and memory. A master navigator, or Po Palahi, carried a mental star compass. He knew hundreds of stars, not just as points of light, but as moving guides. He understood that as he sailed east, new stars would rise while familiar ones dipped below the western horizon. He could feel the direction of the ocean itself. Long, rolling swells generated by distant weather systems acted as a constant directional grid. A sudden shift in the wave pattern could signal an island over the horizon, its mass interrupting the deep ocean rhythm. He watched the sky for clues. Certain cloud formations, a greenish tint on their undersides, hinted at the reflection of a lagoon. The flight of birds was his most reliable short-range signal. The Monu Oku, or white tern, flies out to sea to fish each morning and returns to land each night. Spotting one in the evening meant land was within its flying range, a radius of about 120 miles. Anthropologists who study this tradition point to the sheer volume of knowledge required. Every island, every star, every current pattern had a name and a story. This was how the knowledge was preserved, woven into chants, songs, and epic narratives. A young apprentice did not just memorize facts, he learned the stories of the great navigator Maui, who fished up the islands from the sea. He internalized the routes through the heroes who had sailed them before. the journey to Rapa Nui or Easter Island stands as their ultimate case study. To reach that tiny, isolated speck in the vast eastern Pacific required crossing over 2,000 miles of open ocean. It was a one-way voyage into the absolute unknown, a testament to their supreme confidence in their skills and their vessels. They carried everything needed to start a new society, from taro shoots and sweet potato cuttings to chickens and dogs. Can we even fathom embarking on such a journey today with no GPS, no radio, and no certainty of survival? Their mastery of the Pacific represents the absolute peak of pre-modern exploration, a quiet symphony of human intellect and the natural world. The wind howls across a sea of ice, a world away from the warm Mediterranean. In the year 982, a man named Erik Thorvaldsson, exiled from Iceland for murder, sailed west into this unforgiving void. The saga of Erik the Red describes his discovery not of a barren wasteland, but a land of deep fjords and green valleys. He named it Greenland, hoping the attractive name would lure future settlers. It was a masterstroke of propaganda, and it worked. This was the Viking age of exploration, driven not by cosmic maps but by a potent mix of exile, ambition, and a relentless search for new land and wealth. Their greatest tool was the Longship, a vessel of terrifying beauty and revolutionary design. Its shallow draft allowed it to slide up onto any beach, and its sleek, clinker-built hull, overlapping planks riveted together, gave it both speed and flexibility to ride the North Atlantic's punishing waves. A historian might describe it as the perfect fusion of river raider and ocean explorer. But a ship is nothing without direction. Under overcast skies, when the sun was a mere bright patch in the gloom, Norse navigators relied on a sunstone. This crystal of Iceland spar, held to the sky, could reveal the sun's position by filtering polarized light, acting as a kind of celestial GPS. They also used simple bearing dials, a wooden disc marked with cardinal points, to maintain a steady course once a bearing was set. Their routes unfolded like stepping stones into the unknown. First came the settlement of Iceland, then the perilous leap to Greenland. The final, breathtaking step was Vinland, a name meaning land of wine, spotted by the merchant Bjarni Herjolfsson after he was blown off course, and later settled for a brief time by Erik the Red's own son, Leif Erikson. The journey to Vinland meant navigating through pack ice and bitter cold, a stark contrast to the Polynesian voyages across a warm ocean. For centuries, the Viking sagas were thought to be mere legend. Then, in the 1960s, a Norwegian team discovered the remains of a Norse settlement at Elant's Orks Meadows in Newfoundland. The archaeological evidence was undeniable, from the distinct outlines of Norse longhouses to a bronze cloak pin. This was not just a campsite, but a base for repairing ships and exploring the rich lands to the south. This single site in North America rewrote history, proving that European feet had touched the continent centuries before Columbus. The Viking legacy is a bridge. They took the coastal piloting of the Portolan charts and pushed it into the stormy, unknown Atlantic. Their voyages, recorded in epic poems and confirmed by archaeology, expanded the geographical horizon of Europe from a closed Mediterranean world to a vast, open ocean that promised both peril and possibility. Their stories of Vinland would simmer in the European imagination for generations, a tantalizing whisper of a world waiting to be found. A Roman merchant in the 1st century consults a Greek manuscript called the Periplus of the Eratosthenes Sea. It describes not just coastlines but the intricate social and commercial realities of the Indian Ocean world. It tells him which African port expects copper and which Indian kingdom trades pearls for Roman wine. This was a world connected not by empires but by the predictable rhythm of the monsoon winds. For 6 months of the year, the winds blow steadily from the northeast, perfect for sailing from the Red Sea to India. Then they reverse, blowing from the southwest to carry ships laden with treasure back home. Arab and Indian sailors did not fight these winds, they built their entire calendar around them. Their vessel of choice was the Howe, with its iconic triangular lateen sail that could harness the wind from any angle, cutting across the ocean with an efficiency that would define trade for 1,000 years. Their navigation was a science of precision, using tools like the Kamal to measure stellar altitudes and maintain their latitude. But their greatest tool was knowledge, a vast and shared understanding of ports, products, and people that stretched from the coast of East Africa, known as Zheng, to the Spice Islands of Southeast Asia. Islamic geographers like al-Idrisi, working in the court of a Norman king in Sicily, synthesized this knowledge. He interviewed merchants and travelers, compiling their stories into a monumental world map and book called the Tabula Rogeriana. His work did not just show land, it showed a connected system, integrating Greek, Arab, and Viking knowledge into a single, coherent vision. The goods that moved along these routes transformed the world. Cinnamon and pepper from India, silk and porcelain from China, gems from Sri Lanka, and gold and ivory from Africa traveled west, while glassware, textiles, and horses traveled east. These were not just commodities, they were the reasons maps were drawn and updated. A cartographer in Baghdad would adjust the coastline of Malaya based on a captain's report of a new source for camphor. Can you envision the cultural exchange happening on these crowded wharves? An Arab merchant learns a Malay sailing chant, a Persian astrologer shares star charts with a Chinese scholar, and the design of a ship's rudder evolves from one ocean to the next. This was the first truly international trading system, a network of incredible sophistication that laid down the very routes European explorers would later spend centuries trying to find for themselves. While Arab and Indian traders mastered the monsoon winds, a fleet of unimaginable scale was being prepared on the other side of the Indian Ocean. In the early 15th century, the Ming dynasty's treasure ships dwarfed every other vessel on the high seas. Picture a wooden ship over 400 feet long, its 9 masts towering above the water, its hull a floating fortress capable of carrying a small town's worth of people and goods. These were the flagships of Admiral Zheng, a Muslim eunuch who commanded a grand armada of hundreds of ships on 7 epic voyages. His mission was not conquest, but something far more ambitious. Ming court records state the goal was to display the dynasty's virtue and to collect tribute from distant lands, a vast project of diplomacy and knowledge gathering. The fleet was a meticulously organized city at sea. Alongside the massive treasure ships sailed smaller horse transports, troop carriers, supply vessels, and freshwater tankers, each with a specialized role. A single voyage could involve a crew of 27,000 men, including sailors, soldiers, interpreters, doctors, and even meteorologists to predict the weather. They navigated using the south-pointing chariot, an ancient Chinese innovation, and sophisticated magnetic compasses housed in small, dedicated shrines on the deck. Their routes were plotted using detailed sailing directions and navigational charts, the most famous of which is the Mao Kun map. This remarkable document, a strip map compiled from the Voyages, charted the course from China all the way to the coast of Africa. It noted bearings, water depths, and prominent landmarks with meticulous care, a direct translation of immense practical experience onto paper. For 3 decades, these fleets projected Chinese power and curiosity across the maritime world. They sailed to Java, India, the Arabian Peninsula, and the Swahili coast of East Africa, returning with giraffes for the imperial zoo, spices, gems, and envoys from dozens of kingdoms. The Voyages of Zheng he represent the absolute peak of pre-modern naval technology and organization, a moment when one civilization possessed the capability to explore the entire globe. So why, after such staggering investment and success, did the Ming emperors suddenly order the voyages to cease, the great ships to be left to rot in their harbors, and the very records of these journeys to be destroyed? The answer lies not in a failure of navigation, but a shift in imperial priorities, a turning inward that would leave the oceans open for others. Eratosthenes, the head librarian of Alexandria, noticed something peculiar about a well in the city of Sine. At noon on the summer solstice, the sun shone directly overhead, lighting the bottom of the well with no shadow. Yet in Alexandria, a vertical stick cast a distinct shadow at that same moment. He realized the Earth's surface must be curved. By measuring the angle of that shadow and knowing the distance between the two cities, he performed a feat of geometry that stunned the ancient world. He calculated the Earth's circumference to be about 25,000 miles, a figure astonishingly close to the actual measurement. This was not just a mathematical exercise. It was a fundamental shift in understanding the scale of the world, a breakthrough that made accurate mapping possible for the first time. The Greeks built upon this idea of a spherical Earth with relentless intellectual curiosity. They began to draw lines across their globes, imaginary grids to pinpoint any location. A philosopher named Hipparchus proposed dividing the world into 360 degrees of latitude and longitude. Latitude, the horizontal lines, measured distance north or south of the equator. Longitude, the vertical lines, measured distance east or west. This coordinate system was the ancestor of every GPS location you use today. The greatest synthesizer of this knowledge was Claudius Ptolemy. In his work the Geographia, he compiled the known world from Britain to Sri Lanka, listing the latitudes and longitudes of over 8,000 places. He understood that representing a round world on a flat sheet was a fundamental problem, so he developed early projection methods, mathematical ways to flatten the globe's surface with minimal distortion. One expert on the transmission of knowledge notes that when Europe entered its so-called Dark Ages, it was Arab scholars in places like Baghdad's House of Wisdom who preserved and expanded upon Ptolemy's work. They translated his texts into Arabic, corrected his errors based on new travel accounts, and kept the light of Greek geography burning for centuries. The Romans, pragmatic conquerors and administrators, applied these concepts on a human scale. They cared less for the theoretical globe and more for the practicalities of moving legions and goods. The Putinger table is a magnificent example, a long, narrow scroll map that is less a geographical picture and more a diagram of the Roman road system. It stretches from Britain to India, compressing the world to show the distances between towns, the locations of bathhouses, and the best places to change horses. It was a roadmap for an empire, a testament to the Roman need to connect and control. Can you see the legacy taking shape? The Greek pursuit of cosmic order, the Roman drive for practical utility, and the Arab dedication to preserving knowledge all fused together. This intellectual heritage, the ideas of a spherical Earth and a grid of coordinates, did not vanish. It lay dormant in libraries, a seed waiting for the right conditions to sprout. When European sailors finally looked beyond the Mediterranean, they did so armed with these very concepts, a mental toolkit inherited from the ancient world that would soon help them cross oceans. A merchant from Samarkand unfurls a scroll of painted silk on a dusty table in a Persian Gulf port. The sailors gathered around see not just a trade route, but a river of information flowing overland. This was the true power of the Silk Road, a network that did more than move silk and spices. It moved ideas directly from the hands of caravan traders into the sea chests of ocean navigators. Chinese maps drawn on silk or paper offered a view of the world from the Pacific, detailing inland rivers and mountain passes unknown to Mediterranean cartographers. In return, Arab scholars shared their perfected astrolabes and celestial tables, tools that could guide a ship across the trackless ocean. The European Portolan charts, with their precise coastlines, met the vast interior knowledge of the Asian continent. This was a cross-pollination of cartography on a global scale. A young Marco Polo witnessed this exchange firsthand. His written account of his travels, though some dismissed it as fantasy, was packed with geographical details that would later fire the European imagination. He described the wealth of Cathay, the spices of the Indies, and the sheer scale of the world beyond the Islamic lands that had long acted as a middleman. His stories created a powerful new desire in Europe, a hunger to reach these fabled lands directly by sea, bypassing the overland caravans and their many tolls and dangers. This fusion of knowledge is perfectly captured in the Catalan Atlas of 1375. Created by the Jewish cartographer Abraham Cresques, this magnificent work began as a traditional Portolan chart of the Mediterranean. But then it stretched eastward, incorporating every scrap of Silk Road intelligence. It showed the Silk Road itself snaking across Central Asia, marked the location of the Mali Empire and its gold-rich King Mansa Musa, and placed illustrations of camels and traders right alongside sea monsters and sailing ships. The atlas was a single document that treated land and sea as one continuous, navigable space. Can you see how this changed the very goal of exploration? The world was no longer a collection of separate regions, but a connected system. A sailor in Lisbon could now look at a map and see a potential sea route to the same spices that a merchant in Venice bought from a caravan. The overland Silk Road, by sharing its secrets, had accidentally drawn a map for its own obsolescence. It revealed the full scope of Asia, creating a target for the maritime powers of Europe, who now dreamed of sailing around the barriers of geography to reach the source of the wealth themselves. A sprawling medieval map, large enough to cover a great hall's table, shows the world not as land and sea, but as the body of Christ. His head looks down from the east, his hands touch the north and south, and his wounded feet rest in the west. This was the Ebstorf map, a stunning vision of sacred geography where every mountain and river existed within a divine frame. For the creators of such maps, the most important truth was not where a city was located, but what it meant in the story of salvation. They were designed as spiritual guides, not sailing directions. A theologian of the era would have seen a map like this as a perfect teaching tool, a single image that could summarize all of human history from the Garden of Eden to the Last Judgment. The world was a stage for biblical events, and the map was its program. One of the most common designs was the T and O map. It depicted the world as a flat, circular disk, the O divided by a T-shaped body of water. The vertical line of the T was the Mediterranean Sea, separating Europe from Africa. The horizontal top of the T was formed by the Don River and the Nile River, together dividing Asia from the other two continents. This simple schema organized the known world into the three lands peopled by the sons of Noah after the Great Flood. Jerusalem always sat at the very center of this circle, the spiritual heart of the world and the site of humanity's redemption. These maps were crowded with meaning, not just mileage. You would find the terrestrial paradise of Eden placed somewhere in the distant east, often walled off from the rest of the world since the expulsion of Adam and Eve. You might see the location of the Tower of Babel or the route of the Israelites' exodus from Egypt, and surrounding it all, beyond the ocean river, might be images of the monstrous races said to inhabit the unexplored edges, like the Cyapods, men with a single giant foot they used to shade themselves from the sun. The Great Hereford Mappa Mundi, created around the year 1300, is the ultimate expression of this worldview. It is a massive parchment, a detailed encyclopedia of both time and space. The city of Jerusalem is literally illustrated at the dead center of the circle. Just above it, you can see a depiction of Christ presiding over the Last Judgment. The map seamlessly blends the city of Rome, the English town of Hereford itself, the Minotaur's labyrinth, and Noah's Ark. For the person who viewed this map, all of these things were equally real and part of a single, divine narrative. The physical journey of a pilgrim to Jerusalem was mirrored by the spiritual journey of the soul toward salvation. So where does this leave the pursuit of scientific accuracy? Can a map that places heaven and hell on the same plane as France and Egypt be considered a failure? Or does it succeed brilliantly in its true purpose, which was to map the human soul's relationship to the cosmos, not to chart a trade route? These sacred maps are a powerful reminder that every map, no matter how precise its satellites, is ultimately a reflection of what its culture values most. The gentle rustle of papyrus reeds along the Nile marked the beginning of a global revolution in ship design. Egyptian boatwrights would bundle these reeds into sleek, curved hulls, creating vessels capable of navigating not only the river but also venturing into the Red Sea for trade. These fragile-looking craft were deceptively strong, their buoyant, flexible construction allowing them to ride the waves where a rigid wooden boat might shatter. This ancient ingenuity set a precedent, a fundamental truth that would echo for millennia. The shape of a ship's hull and the cut of its sail were the ultimate keys to unlocking the world. A naval archaeologist might explain that the choice of materials was everything. In the Mediterranean, where great forests grew, shipbuilders turned to oak and cedar, crafting the sturdy, oar-powered galleys of the Greeks and Romans. But in the treeless expanses of the Indian Ocean and the Nile Delta, they mastered the use of reeds, woven fibers, and later, wood planks sewn together with coconut cordage, creating vessels perfectly adapted to their environment. The single greatest leap in sailing technology was the lateen sail. This triangular sail, mounted on a long, angled yard, was a masterpiece of aerodynamic efficiency. Unlike a simple square sail that could only really push a ship downwind, the lateen sail could be angled to catch the wind from the side, even from slightly ahead. It allowed a D how to tack against the wind to zigzag its way forward against the very element that had once been an absolute barrier. Suddenly, the wind was no longer a one-way street. Control was just as crucial as propulsion. For centuries, ships were steered by a single, large steering oar mounted on the side. This worked well enough on calm rivers, but in a raging Atlantic storm, it was a desperate struggle. The invention of the sternpost rudder, mounted centrally on the back of the ship's hull, changed everything. Connected to a tiller, it gave a single helmsman unprecedented control, allowing a vessel to hold its course in heavy seas and maneuver through treacherous, narrow channels. Now consider the Atlantic coast of Europe, where a humble workhorse of the sea was being refined. The cog was a tubby, robust merchant ship with a single square sail and a flat bottom that allowed it to sit upright on tidal mudflats. It was not fast, but it was incredibly sturdy, a floating fortress of cargo space that could withstand the North Sea's punishing gales. The Vikings took a different approach. Alongside their famous longships for raiding, they developed the Nar, a wider, deeper drafted cargo vessel. Its clinker-built hull, made of overlapping planks, was both flexible and strong, a perfect design for carrying families, livestock, and all the supplies needed to colonize Iceland and Greenland across the cold, violent ocean. All of these innovations culminated in the 15th century with the Portuguese caravel. This was the spacecraft of its age. It blended the square sails of Atlantic cogs for power in following winds with the Latin sails of Arab dhows for unmatched maneuverability. Its shallow draft allowed it to explore far-up unknown rivers, while its robust construction could survive years at sea. Every curve of its hull was a product of accumulated knowledge, a physical answer to the challenges posed by thousands of years of maritime trial and error. So the next time you look at a map, do not just see the lines of the coast. See the ships that made those lines possible. The courage of the sailor was vital, but it was the ingenuity of the shipwright that built the stage for that courage. Without the sternpost rudder, the Latin sail, and the ocean-going hull, the great age of exploration would have remained a fantasy, and the world map would have been forever left with edges blurred by the unknown. A master navigator scans the empty horizon, but his eyes are fixed on a flock of terns flying with urgent purpose. He knows these birds will lead him home. For the Polynesian voyagers, seabirds were living compasses. The Manu o Ku, or white tern, flies out to sea to fish at dawn but must return to its nest on land each night. Spotting these birds in the late afternoon meant an island lay within their flight range, a radius of roughly 120 miles. This was not a guess, it was a precise calculation based on a deep understanding of animal behavior. The navigator would note the birds' direction of flight, whether they were heading out with empty beaks or returning with full ones, and adjust his course accordingly. The ocean itself whispered its secrets to those who knew how to listen. Long before land was visible, its presence was announced by the clouds, a stationary, puffy cloud formation in an otherwise clear sky often forms over the warm, rising air of an island. An experienced navigator might even see a greenish tint on the underside of these clouds, a reflection of the lush green lagoon or forest below. The color of the water was another vital sign. Deep, dark indigo meant profound, landless ocean. A shift to a lighter, greener hue could signal a shallow coral reef or a submerged seamount. Patches of drifting seaweed or land-based debris carried on the currents were like road signs pointing toward a distant shore. At night, the presence of bioluminescent organisms, the phosphorescence churned up in a ship's wake, could reveal the direction and strength of a current, an invisible river within the sea. Modern sailors who practice these ancient arts confirm their enduring accuracy. They speak of feeling the ocean swell, of distinguishing between the deep, resonant ground swells generated by distant storms and the shorter, choppier reflection waves that bounce back from an unseen coastline miles away. Even wind patterns could be read. A constant, steady wind might indicate the open ocean, while erratic, shifting gusts often meant the wind was being disturbed and channeled by the hills and valleys of a nearby landmass. Can you look at the world around you with the same intent? The way a line of ants marches in a downpour might reveal a hidden path to higher ground, the specific moss growing on the north side of a tree, or the way snow melts faster on a southern slope. These are all nature's signposts. This intuitive navigation was never a replacement for celestial reckoning or tools like the Kamal. It was a complementary layer of awareness, a continuous dialogue with the environment that turned the entire ocean from a terrifying void into a readable, living map. This profound connection to the natural world raises a final question. How did all these scattered threads of knowledge, from the star paths of the Pacific to the Portolan charts of the Mediterranean, finally converge into a single, transformative vision of the entire world? In the hushed halls of Istanbul's Topkapi Palace in 1929, a forgotten piece of parchment resurfaced, sending ripples through the world of cartography. Drawn on gazelle skin by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis in 1513, the map was only a fragment, but it was a fragment that contained a stunning vision of the world. It showed the coastlines of Europe, Africa, and the recently discovered lands of the Americas with an accuracy that seemed to defy its time. But it was the southernmost edge of the map that ignited a firestorm of controversy, a landmass that some researchers insist can only be Antarctica, depicted without its mile-thick shroud of ice. Could this Turkish admiral have possessed knowledge of a continent that would not be officially discovered for another 3 centuries? The map itself is a tapestry of sources. Reis wrote in his annotations that he compiled it from 20 different source maps, including one he claimed was used by Christopher Columbus himself. He describes an unknown, warm land to the far south, with immense mountains and strange beasts. He even recounts a story from a captured Spanish sailor about a coast where the weather was so hot that the inhabitants lived in houses built on rafts in the water, a description that feels eerily reminiscent of indigenous communities in South America. Scholars remain deeply divided on the Antarctic interpretation. Mainstream historians argue that the mysterious land is likely a distorted version of the southern tip of South America, a common error in early maps where the geography of the New World was still being pieced together. They point out that the map contains clear inaccuracies, like the Caribbean islands being drawn out of scale. The idea that it shows a pre-glacial Antarctica, they say, requires a tremendous leap of faith and ignores the more plausible explanation of cartographic conflation. Yet proponents of the mystery point to the map's remarkable fit with modern subglacial surveys of the Antarctic coastline. They argue that the contours of the land on the Piri Reis map align with what we now know lies beneath the ice, a profile that would have been invisible to any 16th century explorer. They ask a simple, haunting question: from what lost source did Piri Reis acquire this data? Was it from a now vanished ancient civilization, a seafaring culture with knowledge passed down through the ages and ultimately woven into this single, enigmatic document? The Piri Reis map forces us to confront the gaps in our historical record. It stands as a permanent question mark, a whisper from the past that suggests the story of human exploration is far older and more complex than any textbook dares to admit. What other secrets lie hidden in plain sight, waiting for a curious mind to rediscover them? His voice rose and fell in a rhythmic chant, each syllable a coordinate in a vast mental star chart. This was not a song for entertainment, but a living map, a sequence of stellar directions passed from father to son for countless generations. For cultures without a written language, the human mind was the ultimate library, and oral tradition was the unbreakable chain that preserved the knowledge of how to traverse thousands of miles of open ocean. The star path chant the navigator recited did not just name stars, it wove them into stories. The hero Maui did not just fish up the islands, his journey across the sky mirrored the course a sailor must take to reach a new land. Each star was tied to a legendary event, each constellation to an ancestor's voyage, transforming abstract celestial mechanics into a memorable, epic narrative. This was the essence of memory mapping. A navigator did not visualize a flat piece of parchment. In his mind, he held a cognitive chart of the sea, a dynamic model where star positions, wave patterns, and animal behaviors were all interconnected. He associated specific stars with stories of great chiefs or mythical creatures, creating a powerful mnemonic device that made the information unforgettable. The process of learning was a rigorous, lifelong apprenticeship. A young boy would begin by simply memorizing the charts, learning the names of hundreds of stars and islands. He would then progress to practicing his skills on short voyages, guided by a master navigator. The training was as much about developing intuition and concentration as it was about rote memorization. He learned to sit for hours, feeling the subtle shifts in the swell, observing the faintest changes in cloud color, all while mentally tracking his position on his internal map. Anthropologists who have studied these traditions are consistently amazed by their accuracy and resilience. They note that the same charts, preserved across dozens of generations, could reliably guide a canoe to a tiny, remote island. This was a system tested not in a classroom, but in the life or death reality of the Pacific. It was a science encoded in poetry. One of the most fascinating physical manifestations of this mental mapping is the Micronesian stick chart. These were not charts to be taken on a voyage, but teaching tools constructed from palm ribs and cowrie shells. The curved sticks represented the dominant patterns of ocean swells and currents. The shells represented individual islands. A master would use the chart to teach an apprentice how to read the complex interference patterns that waves created as they reflected and refracted around island chains. The student learned to feel these patterns in the pitch and roll of the canoe, translating the physical model in front of him into a sensory skill he could use at sea. The entire process was often surrounded by ritual practices, from ceremonies before a voyage to taboos that protected sacred knowledge. These rituals were not superstition. They were a framework that enforced discipline and ensured the precise, unchanged transmission of information from one generation to the next. They treated navigation knowledge with the reverence it deserved, for it was the key to their survival and identity. Can you think of a piece of knowledge so vital to your own family or community that it has been preserved through stories and songs? This deep, intergenerational trust in oral history allowed humanity to settle the planet's greatest ocean long before the invention of the compass or the written log. It stands as a monumental testament to the power of the human mind to not only discover the world, but to remember its every contour. Hipparchus of Nicaea gazed at the night sky in the 2nd century before the Common Era, haunted by the sudden appearance of a new star. This celestial event spurred him to a monumental task, the creation of the first comprehensive star catalogue. He plotted the positions and brightness of over 850 stars, not for abstract study, but to provide sailors with a fixed, reliable backdrop against which to measure their journeys. His work established the magnitude system for stellar brightness that we still use in a modified form today. This was the birth of applied astronomy for navigation, a science that would transform guessing into calculation. The legacy of this work is captured in Ptolemy's great text, the Almagest, which states that the true test of astronomical knowledge is its power to predict the movements of the heavenly bodies for the benefit of humankind. From this foundation, the most crucial navigational tools were born, the ephemerides and almanacs. These were books of tables that predicted the future positions of the sun, moon, planets, and stars for every day of the year. A captain planning a voyage would consult his almanac to know exactly where the navigational star Sirius would be on the 1st of March, or when the next full moon would illuminate a treacherous coastline. This data turned the sky from a beautiful mystery into a precision clock and calendar. Perhaps the most sophisticated application was the method of lunar distances for determining longitude. Calculating east-west position had always been the navigator's greatest challenge. The solution, developed over centuries, was elegant. Because the moon moves rapidly against the backdrop of stars, its changing position acts as a hand on a celestial clock. By measuring the angular distance between the moon and a specific bright star, and then comparing that measurement to tables in an almanac that predicted this distance as seen from a reference point like Greenwich, a navigator could calculate the time at that reference point. Comparing this to local time found by observing the sun gave him his longitude. It was a complex and difficult process, but it was the first truly reliable method for solving the longitude problem at sea. Arab and Persian astronomers elevated this science to an art form. They produced exhaustive documents known as Zheng, which were more than just star tables. These texts combined astronomical data with geographical coordinates and detailed instructions for timekeeping and navigation. The Tolden Tables, compiled in the 11th century, fused Greek, Hindu, and original Arabic observations to create a working system for the entire Mediterranean world. Can you see the direct line from those handwritten Zheng tables to the digital almanac inside your smartphone's GPS today? The principle is identical, predicting celestial body positions to find a location. Only the technology has changed. These astronomical advances did not just make navigation more accurate, they made it profoundly more predictable. A merchant could now plan a voyage from Alexandria to India with a reasonable expectation of when he would arrive, transforming maritime trade from a gamble into a business. The stars, once seen as the immutable realm of the gods, had become the most reliable partners in humanity's journey across the planet. The captain of an Arab D, how feels the wind shift, a new breath filling the lateen sail as his vessel turns its prow from the Arabian coast toward the open sea. He is riding the Kaskazi, the northeast monsoon, a seasonal wind that for 6 months each year blows with such reliable force that it transforms the Indian Ocean into a predictable highway. His voyage to the Malabar coast of India is not a battle against the elements, but a collaboration with them. This deep understanding of global wind patterns was the final piece of the navigational puzzle, a force that turned daunting voyages into scheduled trade routes. Climatologists explain these systems as vast engines driven by the sun's uneven heating of the Earth. The trade winds, steady easterlies that blow toward the equator, created a conveyor belt across the Atlantic. A sailor like Christopher Columbus did not simply sail west. He dropped south from Spain to catch the Canary Current and the northeast trade winds, which propelled his tiny fleet steadily across the ocean. To return, he sailed north to pick up the westerlies, the powerful winds that blow from the west in the mid-latitudes, which then pushed him back to Europe. This great circular route, known as the Volte du Mars, was a masterful exploitation of the planet's atmospheric machinery. In the Indian Ocean, the rhythm was even more precise. From April to September, the southwest monsoon carried ships from Africa to India, laden with ivory and gold. Then, from October to March, the winds reversed into the northeast monsoon, perfect for the return journey, carrying spices, textiles, and gems back to the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf. Entire societies and economies were built around this calendar. Ships would gather in harbors, waiting for the exact week the winds would turn favorable, their departures and arrivals as predictable as a modern train schedule. Can you see how this mastery of the air reshaped the map? The winds dictated not only where people could go, but when they could go, creating a seasonal pulse to global exchange. The courage of the sailor and the genius of the shipwright were nothing without the cooperation of the wind. This intricate dance between human ambition and planetary climate systems did not just connect ports, it wove the continents themselves into a single, interdependent story, setting the stage for a final, unifying vision of the entire world. A wooden ship, its sails patched and its crew haggard, entered a labyrinth of fog-shrouded channels. This was the Victoria, one of the 5 ships under Ferdinand Magellan's command, threading the treacherous passage that would later bear his name. For 38 days, they navigated the icy, unpredictable strait at the southern tip of the Americas, seeing the campfires of the Tierra del Fuego people glowing in the darkness. When they finally emerged into a new ocean, it was so calm that Magellan named it the Pacific, the peaceful sea. He had no idea of the unimaginable vastness that lay ahead. Antonio Pigafetta, the expedition's chronicler, wrote of their despair as weeks turned into months with no land in sight. The biscuits they ate were full of worms and stank of rat urine, and the water they drank was putrid and yellow. Scurvy began to claim the men, their gums swelling over their teeth until they could not eat. Pigafetta recorded that 19 men died, and those who survived were so weak they could hardly man the sails. This was the brutal reality of the first attempt to circumnavigate the globe, a voyage driven by a simple, powerful goal. The Spanish crown wanted a western route to the Spice Islands, the Moluccas, to break the Portuguese monopoly on nutmeg and cloves, commodities worth more than their weight in gold. The rivalry between these two Iberian powers was not just a competition for wealth, but a race to literally map the world, with each new voyage directly updating the Portolan charts with coastlines that had only been conjecture. These expeditions relied on more than European courage. Magellan himself employed an enslaved Malay man named Enrique as an interpreter, whose knowledge of the language in the Philippines suggests he may have been circling the globe to return to his homeland. Later, Spanish galleons crossing the Pacific would depend on indigenous Filipino and Mexican pilots who understood the winds and currents of that great ocean far better than any European sailor. Their uncredited expertise was woven into the very fabric of these so-called discoveries. When the Victoria finally limped back to Spain in 1522, with only 18 of the original 270 men, it carried a cargo of spices valuable enough to pay for the entire expedition. It had proven the Earth was a single, connected world, but at a staggering human cost. Can you weigh the value of a globe encircled against the silence of 252 voices lost to starvation, disease, and violence? These first circumnavigations were not just triumphs of navigation, but profound human tragedies that forever redrew the map in both ink and blood. A ship's captain in the 15th century, his eyes scanning a vellum chart, would have seen a warning in the ocean west of the Azores. "Here be dragons," the map might say, or illustrate great whirlpools swallowing ships whole. This was the Sea of Darkness, a medieval version of the Bermuda Triangle where superstition filled the void of knowledge. These were not mere decorations, but dangerous cartographic errors with real-world consequences. Why did such profound mistakes happen? The first reason was simply a lack of data. Mapmakers often worked from second-hand accounts, translating a sailor's rough sketch or a merchant's exaggerated tale into a permanent line on a chart. A single, misremembered coastline could be copied for generations. The second reason was the process of copying itself. Every time a map was hand-copied by a scribe, small errors crept in. A bay might become a river, an island might shift 50 miles, and over decades, these minor mistakes could compound into entirely fictional geographies. The third, and perhaps most powerful reason, was the deliberate inclusion of myth. Cartographers felt a blank space on a map was an admission of ignorance, so they populated the void with places from legend, like the wealthy Isle of Brassel or the Kingdom of Prester John, hoping to inspire explorers or simply to tell a good story. Cartographic historians point to the infamous mountains of Kong as a classic case. This massive mountain range was drawn across the entire width of West Africa on 18th century maps, a complete fabrication based on a single explorer's misinterpretation. It persisted on maps for over a century, deterring exploration into the interior because it presented an impassable barrier that did not exist. The consequences of these errors were not just academic. Ships sailed toward phantom islands and vanished, their crews victims of a line drawn in error. Fortunes were lost funding expeditions to find El Dorado or the Seven Cities of Cibola, places that existed only on maps and in human greed. Yet sometimes these very mistakes led to accidental discovery. Christopher Columbus relied on maps that drastically underestimated the Earth's circumference and placed Japan far closer to Europe, errors that convinced him he could reach Asia by sailing west. His monumental miscalculation, of course, led him to an entirely new continent. The authenticity of certain maps is still hotly debated by scholars, like the Vinland map, which purportedly shows Norse settlements in North America. Is it a genuine medieval artifact or an elaborate modern forgery? The debate itself shows how much weight we place on these ancient documents. So the next time you glance at a digital map on your phone, consider what subtle assumptions or outdated data might be hidden in its code. Our own charts are not perfect. They are simply the latest draft in a long, error-filled, and ultimately triumphant human project to draw the world. A Spanish conquistador, his body scarred and weary from years of combat, pushed through the dense mangrove swamps of a land he would name Florida. Juan Ponce de Leon was not merely searching for new territory to claim, but for a myth, a legendary spring whose waters could restore youth and grant immortality. His quest for the Fountain of Youth was no isolated fantasy. It was part of a powerful current of belief that drew European explorers across the Atlantic, a force as potent as any trade wind. The diaries and letters of these men are filled with more than just geographical notes. They are testaments to a profound hope. They wrote of rumors heard from native peoples, of stories passed down from classical antiquity, all pointing to earthly rewards beyond comprehension. This psychological drive for wealth, eternal life, or a return to a prelapsarian paradise was the rocket fuel for expeditions that logic alone could never justify. Another powerful legend was that of the 7 cities of Cibola, rumored to be built entirely from gold and located somewhere in the deserts of North America. The Spanish explorer Francisco Vázquez de Coronado led a massive expedition deep into the continent, driven by a report from a friar who claimed to have seen one of these cities from a distance. He found only humble pueblos of adobe, but the dream of El Dorado, the gilded man, would continue to lure men to their deaths in the jungles of South America for centuries. Then there was the enduring myth of Prester John, a powerful Christian king believed to rule a wealthy and pious kingdom somewhere in the east or later in the interior of Africa. For generations, European monarchs sent envoys to find him, hoping to forge an alliance against their Islamic rivals. These searches, while failures in their primary goal, resulted in some of the first detailed European maps of the African continent. Even the brutal quest for the Northwest Passage was fueled by a cartographic myth, the idea of an open polar sea, a warm, navigable ocean at the top of the world, free from ice. Can you see the pattern? A dream, however fantastical, creates a destination on a map. That destination gives a sailor a direction to sail, a purpose that overrides the terror of the unknown. The mythology did not just accompany exploration, it actively expanded the boundaries of the known world by giving explorers a reason to push past the edge of the chart. It was the dream that built the map, not the other way around. Columbus stepped onto the sandy shore of Guanahani, a land he would rename San Salvador, and was immediately met by the Taino people. They did not see him as a discoverer, for they had always known this world. As he gestured toward the horizon, they shared the names and directions of neighboring islands, providing the first live intelligence that would fill the blank spaces on his charts. This pattern repeated across the globe, where European exploration was often less a matter of discovery and more a process of absorbing ancient local knowledge. Aboriginal Australians have navigated their continent for over 60,000 years using songlines, intricate oral maps woven into epic stories that describe landmarks, water sources, and star paths. In the frozen Arctic, Inuit hunters created mental maps of sea ice, currents, and breathing holes for seals, knowledge passed down that was as precise as any parchment chart. And deep in the Amazon, indigenous tribes held an encyclopedic understanding of river systems and medicinal plants. a living library of the rainforest. Historians like Dr. Daniel Richter emphasize that these contributions were systematic and sophisticated, not casual tips. Lewis and Clark's famed expedition across North America would have likely faltered without the guidance of Sacagawea, a Shoshone woman who interpreted, traded for horses, and navigated treacherous mountain passes from memory. The methods of sharing this knowledge were as diverse as the cultures themselves. A Polynesian chief might draw a complex wave chart in the wet sand. A Micmac elder in North America could sketch a detailed map of river networks on a piece of birch bark. These were not primitive drawings, but functional guides that enabled outsiders to traverse territories they could never have navigated alone. Can you imagine possessing a map of your homeland so complete it exists only in memory and song, yet is accurate enough to guide a stranger for thousands of miles? This indigenous knowledge did not just fill gaps in early European maps, it provided the very lines and labels. Acknowledging this is not rewriting history, but finally reading all the pages of a story we thought we knew. A new kind of map appeared in the German city of Saint Dié in 1507, one that would forever change how we see the world. Printed on 12 separate sheets of paper, the Waldseemüller map was the first to clearly label the new southern continent as America, in honor of the explorer Amerigo Vespucci. But its true revolution was not in a name, it was in its medium. The invention of the printing press meant that for the first time, a map could be copied not by a scribe's hand, but by a machine producing hundreds of identical copies. Knowledge was no longer a unique hand-painted treasure locked in a prince's library. It became a commodity, something a merchant or a ship's captain could own, study, and mark with their own notes. This single technological leap democratized geography, fueling the ambitions of an entire continent. As each returning ship brought back new coastal profiles and depth soundings, mapmakers like Gerardus Mercator could rapidly incorporate this flood of data into updated editions. His own famous world map of 1569 solved a critical problem for sailors. How do you represent the curved surface of the Earth on a flat chart so that a straight line corresponds to a constant compass bearing? His solution, the Mercator projection, stretched the polar regions into vast, distorted emptiness, but it allowed a navigator to plot a straight line course across an ocean. This was a map designed not for contemplation but for action. The science of mapping itself was becoming more rigorous. Surveyors began using triangulation, a method where you measure a baseline and then use angles to calculate distances to faraway points, creating networks of precisely located landmarks. Maps started to include standardized scales and consistent symbols, moving from artistic interpretations toward scientific documents. Perhaps no organization embodied this new precision more than the Dutch East India Company. Its mapmakers produced incredibly detailed, secret charts of trade routes and coastlines, treating geographical knowledge as a direct source of corporate and national power. Can you see how these technical advances reshaped the globe itself on paper? The world was shrinking not in size but in perceived distance and danger. A captain could now plan a voyage from Amsterdam to Java with a printed chart, a manual on the Mercator projection, and a reasonable expectation of success. This transition from the unique to the mass-produced, from the symbolic to the scientifically useful, set the stage for every map that would follow, turning the entire planet into a measured and manageable space. A modern sailor grips the helm of a replica Polynesian voyaging canoe, the Hokula, as it crests a deep blue wave. He is not navigating by a screen, but by the stars, retracing ancient routes for a documentary film. This living connection to our maritime past is not a niche hobby. It is a testament to stories so powerful they have sailed across millennia. the legacy of ancient mariners is woven into the very fabric of our culture, from the epic poems we read to the blockbuster films we watch. Homer's Odyssey, a foundational text of Western literature, is at its heart the story of a sailor trying to find his way home, battling monsters and tempests that symbolize the ultimate human struggles against nature and fate. Centuries later, Herman Melville's Moby Dick draws on the same deep well of nautical experience, transforming a whaling voyage into a profound meditation on obsession and the unknowable sea. These are not just tales of adventure, they are chronicles of survival that speak directly to our own journeys. The animated film Mona powerfully revived Polynesian voyaging traditions for a global audience, framing the young heroine's quest not as a rebellion, but as a return to her people's identity as master navigators. Our language itself is saturated with the legacy of these sailors. We speak of being on an even keel, of learning the ropes, of feeling adrift or knowing the lay of the land, all terms born on the decks of ancient ships. Communities around the world actively keep this heritage alive. In Scandinavia, Viking festivals feature longship reenactments and craftsmanship, celebrating a history of exploration that defines national identity. Across the Pacific, the Polynesian Voyaging Society's revival of non-instrument navigation has sparked a cultural renaissance, with young people learning the star chants their ancestors used to settle the world's largest ocean. These stories of courage and discovery continue to resonate because they answer a fundamental human need to push beyond the horizon. The next time you hear a shanty, visit a maritime museum, or even look at a simple compass, remember you are touching a chain of knowledge that stretches back to the first person who dared to sail beyond the sight of land. That spirit of exploration is not a relic, it is a living flame passed down through stories, waiting for the next generation to take the helm. The story of ancient maps is a chronicle of human courage painted on clay, vellum, and the very stars. From the symbolic discs of Babylon to the precise Portolan charts of the Mediterranean, and from the star paths of the Pacific to the monsoon routes of the Indian Ocean, we see a universal drive to push beyond the horizon. This was never a single story, but a tapestry woven by countless cultures, each contributing a unique thread. The Phoenician trader, the Polynesian wayfinder, the Viking adventurer, and the Arab scholar all shared a common trait, a breathtaking resilience in the face of the vast and terrifying unknown. Their legacy is the interconnected world we inhabit today, a world they first imagined and then boldly created with every voyage. These pioneers mastered a delicate balance, blending precise observation of waves and stars with the powerful myths that gave their journeys meaning. They understood that a map could chart both a coastline and a spiritual path, that a sailor needed both a camel to measure the sky and a story to fuel his soul. The tools they invented, from the simple steering oar to the complex astrolabe, were extensions of their intellect, turning the whispers of nature into a repeatable science. This foundation of knowledge, built over millennia, made our modern world of global exchange and instant navigation possible. Every time you glance at a map on your phone, you are accessing the cumulative courage of every ancient mariner who ever sailed into the blue. The Greek philosopher Plato once wrote that the unexamined life is not worth living. We might add that the uncharted world is a prison for the human spirit. The epic tale of these explorers reminds us that our own lives are voyages, and that curiosity paired with resilience will always be the most powerful compass. We encourage you to look at your own community with the eyes of a cartographer. What local histories and hidden journeys are waiting to be discovered? Let us know in the comments which ancient voyage amazes you the most, the Polynesian settlement of the Pacific or the Viking reach for North America. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the roots of our world, subscribe for more journeys through history. Thank you for watching.